Hello and welcome. My name is Israel, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to finish a pick in Fishbowl using Cloud Pages. Let's get started. So, in order to do essentially what most people are able to do inside of Fishbowl, which is finish a pick, here we are just finishing the pick in the client. To do that via API calls is going to take a bit of work, a bit of understanding of how we do that and what systems are involved. But honestly, it doesn't take more than approximately 20 lines of code, really. But it is important for you to understand what we're dealing with and why we built it in a certain way to understand kind of the intent behind all of this and some of the magic that was necessary to do that. So be prepared for a little bit of explanation. And when we get to the code, it'll be pretty straightforward. So if you want to skip to code and then come back for explanation, go ahead. No, it's not gonna. I'm not. I won't be upset. So let's talk a little bit about the Fishbowl API. So if you go over to the Fishbowl documentation site, it says like, "Hey, the API is great, it's fantastic." But they tell you Fishbowl support will not troubleshoot the API, but several resources are listed below to help you get started. That is number one, right? Fishbowl provides an API, but they won't really support it. They won't help you sit down, ask questions why I can't finish the pick or why this or that happened, right? But they did put resources and effort into doing it because some of their other products use the API. And what do I mean? Well, there's a variety of ways for things to communicate with Fishbowl, and things are kind of built up on top of each other. So that's why some of this stuff is a bit. It's a bit confusing. I'll be honest with you. And when we talk about the API, we're going to talk about a very specific version of the API, which is called the legacy XML API. And because that has the most functionality that we need in order to do things like finish a pick, process a receipt, um, ship a shipment, those sort of things. Some of those things you can do via CSV imports, which we've shown in another video, but some of those things like finish a specific line on a pick are just not possible with the CSV data set that Fishbowl has given us. So we have to go deeper inside of Fishbowl and work on it. Now, what did I mean earlier when I said some of Fishbowl's products uses the API? Of course, everything uses an API. That is true, but there's a API that Fishbowl uses for things like to commit a document or group picks and those sort of things. Those are what I call the internal API, like what lives inside of the client and how the client communicates with the server and has the server do those sort of things. There's what I call the plugin API or the XML API, and that was intended to be used on products that were outside of the system of the client, namely things like external integrations. We're talking about some of the old official plugin integrations, which we could talk as another video as they transition to Cellware. But we also talked about Fishbowl Go. Even before Fishbowl Go, there used to be another type of product called Fishbowl Mobile, which was written for Windows Mobile, and it also used the XML API, and that was just the thing you did back in 2009, 2010. But anyway, so there's the Fishbowl API is actually quite old, and it's kind of like a subset of access to the main client stuff. But if you finish a pick in in the client and you're working with the API, you're going to be able to finish it using the same logic. There's very little overlap in terms of uh, doing it the API way versus doing it the client way. If the client does it right, likely the API will do it right. And if you do it wrong, there are some things that Fishbowl will let you do wrong, which is unfortunate, but we'll talk about that here in a minute and explain that. So let's look at this legacy API. Where do we get to that legacy API? What are we talking about? What can we do? Because if we go back to the Fishbowl docs, it'll send you to a documentation site. In fact, you have to be accessing your Fishbowl client. So let me get that open for you guys. Okay. So we've got our local version of Fishbowl's API documentation. So if you ask Fishbowl support or anybody, what API you have, they'll send you this. And this is, I'm using Fishbowl 24.5. I know it's July when I'm recording this. And this is essentially it. You log in, you authenticate, you can import CSV like I've shown you before. You can maybe get some inventory data. You can, iterate through some like manufacturer orders, memos, parts, products, purchase orders. But it's kind of, honestly, it's very anemic, right? I think they put a lot of effort and energy into creating the what I call the web API, which is over HTTP, and its payload is in JSON. And it was, if they had full completion of what you can do in the client in the REST API, that would have been amazing. I would have transitioned every project that we have over to that and not look back. Unfortunately, they just never finished it, and a majority of it is just kind of getting data. Like, okay, you can post updates of unit measures, but like you only do that once. You can issue some purchase orders, but like where's the sales order endpoint? So it's a bit anemic, right? That, and paired with the fact that at some point you could import a sales order CSV, a sales order. Here they actually specify how to do it, and they're like, okay, that's good enough, and whether it really is good enough or not, I don't know, but you could do it, and I think I've tried this before in a proof of concept, so it does exist, it does work, but they specify, like, is there another version of the API? I'm like, yes, there was a previous version of the API which uses a socket connection, meaning you have to connect to the data to the server like the client using TCP and send messages back and forth using XML, right? And it sends you to a link to download a zip file. I already got that open, and let's take a look at what that looked like. And that is essentially this API XML, which is the older version of the documentation. Here's where we've got the original objects, we've got the legacy requests, and there are some neat things in here like get the pick, save a pick, get a sales order, save a sales order, get a ship, get a receipt, save a receipt. Like those are the sort of things like we'd love to be able to do. I think there's also one in here that will create a bill of material or a work order. Yeah, build BOM request. Like those are amazing things. Those are things we really need in order to drive some value, drive some magic with the client. In the end, do I really need a get part list request? No, because I've got the database to do. But if I wanted to, for example, update a part object after changing it, that's great. If I wanted to update custom fields, I should be able to do that. If I wanted to create a new sales order, edit a sales order, all those sort of things. Those are things that I think API requests can and should do. But SQL for everything else, in my opinion. But that's just me. Anyway, so when we're talking about the API, we're talking about this legacy XML API, because that is the most feature rich. At some point, Fishbowl made a JSON API, but as you can see in terms of the requests, it's a lot less, right? So Fishbowl has gone through the original XML API. They go, wait, XML is too confusing for people to use. Let's transition to JSON. Didn't finish that. Okay, let's go. The TCP socket's the issue. Let's go do JSON and HTTP. That's great. Oh wait, we're not going to finish that. And this is where things are at. Like if you want to do something, you may need to connect to a bunch of different ways to do it. Thankfully, we have access to the database, so we don't really need the API to do database calls or data calls, read-only things. But to write or perform updates to Fishbowl, we should really use the API. It provides the business logic. It provides the magic. It's using exactly what the Fishbowl client's doing underneath it. It just exposes it in one of these various formats. But anyway, we'll be using the XML API to do what we need to do. But the issue is that when we're working with the legacy API, we will not be working with XML directly, right? The way it works is, in order to work in the browser, we convert it from XML to JSON, allow it to be used in the browser in JSON, and then when we need to send it back to Fishbowl, we'll send it back to the client in JSON, which then will convert it to XML and make that work. It's very similar to how Fishbowl did some other things. Again, I'm kind of explaining some of the background. So if you want, like I said, forewarned you guys, skip this if this is too much. But anyway, so there's some bugs, and we talk about that here in the documentation. But in order to use it, just like the CSV, we need to specify what kind of request type it is, and then your payload, right? So a string of the request types, and then a payload of your JSON, and it's very happy to go and do that, right? So if you have an object request, convert that to a JSON string, send it down to the client, parse it, the JSON string back into an object, and then do what you need to do, right? So we have a documentation page called the Legacy Fishbowl XML JSON API call types. And the way that it works internally is that we have some Java calls that we send down, and there is a add API call type to go with it. In this case, we took some documentation from something else, but the idea is that we have, if you wanted to add inventory, make that particular request, you need to specify this particular string, right? Not this one. This one, we might have to remove this. This might confuse some people. But this is what Fishbowl is using internally in order to convert the requests into internal requests so that Fishbowl server can actually do that for you from the client. So build bomb is another example. The two that we're going to be using today is the get pick and the save pick. Get that to the bottom here. Yep, save pick. Those are the two we're going to do. We need a pick object to work with. We're going to manipulate it, and then we're going to save back to Fishbowl. And when it gets to Fishbowl, it's going to go perform our finishing operation, and then we will have finished the pick in Fishbowl. Cool. Again, that's a lot of background. I'm sure it's a little bit confusing. Our goal is to take some of these API call types and turn them into little cookbook files for everyone to kind of understand and reason about, and make this a lot less confusing or just legacy. I know it doesn't sound great, but this is the most functionality that we've got with the Fishbowl platform. If anything, the new version of Fishbowl gets more love because we build a lot of cool things with just what we have here. So, and we do drive a lot of value with even the scraps of effort that we've had from projects and efforts from years past. One last thing, if you need to access the legacy API and somehow Fishbowl drops it, there's also an archive.org page. I believe this is from 2020 or 2022. The legacy API does not get changed a whole lot. This will load, and it's the same thing that you would have seen here, just archive.org. Thankfully, it's still here. This might be useful in order for us to know how to build some of these requests. This is quite detailed. I won't go through all of it, but it gives you an idea of what you're going to be looking at and what things are what. Cool. Okay. As promised, let's switch over into code and show you what we can do. So as I started earlier, the whole goal is to be able to essentially finish this pick and see that it's removed inventory from main location to main shipping. It's got lot tracking and all that. That's the whole goal. We're trying to finish a pick because we may need to, right? We may need to, I don't know, for one operation, finish all of the stage 1 parts get finished now, and then another operation in an automated fashion, or even a button or a page finishes stage 2, and stages are defined at the part custom field level and things like that. So things you can't do yourself without a lot of clicking and things like that. If you can automate it, reduce the clicks down to 0 or none, or 1 or just a little bit, and kind of make that work. That's kind of our goal when we deal with this sort of stuff. And then in some other videos, we'll make some things like, let's create a manufacturer order off a bomb, or let's create a sales order, or let's create a purchase order, or let's ship a shipment. Like, these are things that people do that might require some finesse to do so. Okay, let's go into code. So I've got my hello world, and this is the code that we're going to end up at. I'm going to delete all of it, and we're going to add it line by line to essentially just go through what we're trying to do. And we're going to pull up our page, or pull up our console here. We're going to save that, reset it. Cool. Let's get at it. So in the script body, what we're going to do is just start with our same document ready, because I don't want to add a button or nothing. And let's make sure we got console log. Hello. Yeah, that still works. Cool. Okay, the first thing we need to do is get the pick. So what I've done is I've already got a little few lines of code here ready to go. And I'm building my pick request object, right? So get pick RQ. If we went to the documentation site, right? It needs, that's the tag. The next tag in the XML is pick number. That's it. Mentally, you'll have to learn how to translate some of these things. Um, but some of it you won't need to, because once you get the object itself, then you've got the structure and you can kind of jazz off of that. So in this case, to create my pick request object just needs this. I supply my pick number here. And then if I want to go ahead and send a request, we're going to get that going. But before we do that, we need a little bit of a helper function, because it's not fun, because we're going to be doing multiple API calls. It's not fun to keep running the run API JSON method, serialize it to string, deserialize it from string to JSON. So we're going to add a method that does that for us. So I'll drop that over here. And like I said, it takes a type, give it our object request, log it for posterity, convert it into a JSON string, let the response go, get the response, log the response, return the response. Not a whole lot, right? So let's go get a pick. Okay. So when we go get a pick, this is what it's going to look like, right? And what I had mentioned before, how the API legacy calls work, we're going to say get pick. There they are. So that's the string, the magic string that we need to provide. I believe it's case insensitive now, but it might still be case sensitive. There's an update that we're pushing down. But for now, just keep it case sensitive. This will allow us to go ahead and get that pick. So let's go ahead and run it. Save it. Run that. Cool. So we've got our get pick request object because we logged that earlier, and then we get our pick response object, and there we go. We got a status code of 1,000. If you remember from the last video, status codes of 1,000 mean it was a good response, good request. And here's our pick object, right? We've got pick items, and the first pick item has all this data, second pick item has all this data, and so on and so forth. The way that it works with Fishbowl is that if you want to make a change to something, you've got to send the whole document back over. And then as it iterates through the save operation, and if it notices that the previous object is the state, the previous state was this, and the new state that you provided is different, then it starts doing the operations that are necessary to make those changes, right? So if we see previously that our status for our pick item, in this case is 20, which means I believe started, and if that changes to 40, which is finished, then it will finish that line. Should there be an API call to say, like, I want to finish line ID, I believe it's in here somewhere, status, pick item ID, there, 743, I want to finish 743 to status finished with this details, this location, this part tracking, this quantity. Yeah, I would love that. It doesn't work that way, but for today, we won't get into that. We will definitely be able to finish the pick with the following lines of code. Okay. And since we have 2 lines of pick to finish, we need to iterate both lines and just finish them both. I know we have enough inventory. If you don't have enough inventory, you'll get an error. But again, we're assuming everything's cool. So I'll just throw a quick few lines of code to drop that in there. So what I'm going to do is just, I don't need that really. So I traverse the pick object, get my pick itself, and then I iterate over the pick item property. See that over there? And I say if the status is less than 40 and the status is greater than 10, then the status needs to be set to 40, meaning finished. Cool. And then the next thing we do, which is create our save pick request. So the save pick request looks like something like this. And we just the same thing like we saw before in the other documentation site. And then we have a save pick RQ. and we have a pick property, and we just give it the pick object. Right? Just set it. And then the next thing we do, and the final thing we do, which is save the pick. Right? And the same thing that I talked about before, you get your strings to tell what kind of request you're doing. You got your object JSON, your object to provide, and the helper function will just handle that for you. Right? So if we go ahead and refresh this, we've got our get pick response, request response, save pick request, save pick response. Okay, status 1000, the whole pick object again. Status finished, status ID 40. Like this is good. This is good. This is looking good from here. So we pop into Fishbowl client itself, we do refresh, it finished it exactly like the client would. Right? Now from here, if you wanted to say only pick the first line or the second line, or choose a different location or choose a different lot, that's a bit more complex. You'll need more API calls to do that, like a get tag or get location. But all of that is very, very straightforward, very easy. We've done that before. We'll have examples on how to do that sort of thing if you need to do that, or you need to control what's going on, or do something different. Right? So let's recap. The API calls to do so is available in JSON or JavaScript now. It's built up on a few layers of legacy Fishbowl code, but it works. It absolutely works. And we'll be able to help any clients who have projects or questions or on how to do these sort of things. If you have questions now, just leave them a comment on the video, and we'll be happy to hear from you guys if we have a project or you have an idea you'd like to see for your company. In later videos, we'll be talking more about some other API calls and we're building up the documentation, making it more public. We also plan to have like a Slack channel where people can come and ask questions from a more technical point of view, share the knowledge, share the love, so to speak. And in other videos, we'll kind of go through more like from start of a project to end of a project, how we develop for a customer. And we'll do some showcases as well of things that we've done in the past. Okay. Thanks again. This is a longer video, but hopefully it was very helpful, very enlightening, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks. Goodbye.